We're playing SDH intro. Welcome to a crossover edition. Soccer down here, soccer over there, Monday, January 14th. The bass is dropped, the horns have been played, people are dancing, all kinds of stuff on a Monday night edition from the SDH Network. I'm Jason Longshore. Jarrett_Smith is here. The garlic bread warlord Nick Alifi is here, although he is busy in the kitchen as we speak. So I might be crashing his place in a little bit. John Nelson will be joining us in a bit. He will be on his way back from Auburn, Alabama. John was with me earlier today at the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta Training Ground, where Frank de Boer was introduced to the local media. And we were there all day from 92.9. Shows started at the Pavilion at the training ground at 6 o'clock this morning with John and Hugh, and Dukes and Bell are wrapping things up in about 27 minutes. Long day of coverage. I was there from 8 until just after 5, and then rushed home and got here in time to walk Gwen and sat down, and now we're doing a show, guys. It's one of those days.
Yeah, the maniacal cackling you did during the intro just pretty much paced me for what we had in store.
And probably some of that was supposed to be muted, but again, chaos and craziness. That's just pretty much where we're at right now.
Yeah, at this point, I'm about halfway through making my marinara, so if you hear boiling in the background, we have some noodles going as well, so we can turn this into Food Network over there if we have to.
Ooh, but that could be the secret seventh hour. We don't have one of those yet.
It can be. I have a pretty mean marinara sauce that I'm willing to share with the community, should anyone be interested.
I am going to have to take you up on that one of these days, and if we can work on a bolognese, and stuff like that, I'd like to dig into my Italian cooking style and philosophy with you at one point. We
can do that.
Let's talk about...
I would like to do Italian cooking that is not like pepperoni pizza Hot Pockets, if that's okay.
Wow. I'm past that. Okay, I don't need to start there, Nick. I'm a little bit past that one. But let's talk style and philosophy a little bit with the new manager of Atlanta United, Frank de Boer. Introduced today. Got a chance to meet him at the end of the day. He hopped on with Dukes and Bell. If you haven't had a chance to hear that interview, it's over at 92.9 The Game right now. Had a chance to just listen back to it before we got started. I was struck by a few things, guys, and I'm sure you guys have had a chance to hear lots of the different things that were said today from Frank. I was struck with how, I think, confident he was in the setup at Atlanta United and how much that was in stark contrast to what he faced in his last two jobs, Inter Milan and Crystal Palace. And Nick, we talked about it. You mentioned it on the hot drop that came out right after he was announced. The case at Inter Milan, I don't think people truly understand how dysfunctional that club was at that time. I mean, Frank's talked about getting gray hairs from what he had to do off the field at these last two jobs. He wasn't able to just coach.
Yeah.
He had to deal with a million other things instead of doing what he does best and being a coach. I mean, I think some of his comments today really kind of drove that home for me, that you can't really look at those two jobs from a result standpoint and compare them to what he did at Ajax and what he will hopefully do in Atlanta.
Yeah, so when we talk about, and a friend actually asked me this question this past weekend, which was, throw the Crystal Palace thing aside because it was so cartoonishly fast how they let him go. What about the Inter Milan deal, and how did that work out? And what you had, this really goes back. This isn't just a Frank de Boer thing, where Maratti, who was the owner of Inter, just dumped a wall of cash into the team in order to compete it with Juve and AC Milan, who at that time were just, kicking all the tail and taking all the names. He had to dump cash in, and there was a payoff. I mean, they won the treble, they got the Champions League, and then out of nowhere, Maratti decides, hey, look, man, I've been throwing too much cash away. And then financial fair play comes in. And imagine, having when like you pay your mortgage and then suddenly you forget the fact that, oh, your massive credit card bill is due like immediately afterwards and you don't have enough cash to pay it off. That's where the new ownership came in with Inter. And that's the situation that really Frank de Boer came into, because even when the new ownership came in, they recognized that business had to change. And Serie A is not known for promoting youth talent. They'll play the old guys all day long, but they have a huge issue with youth. They just don't trust them. And Inter realized, well, we have to promote youth. We have to sell players in order to balance the books for financial fair play. We're stuck in with financial fair play punishment. We can't bring in a whole ton of players. So who has the most experience in dealing with promotion of youth, selling of youth, and balancing the books? Oh, Ajax. Who's a guy who was an absolute champion at Ajax? Oh, Frank de Boer. Perfect fit. Let's bring him in. But the problem is the culture of the ownership and the culture of the fan base did not mesh. And whenever Frank comes in and he starts trying to implement this system, then automatically there's pushback. And the results weren't good. I mean, we can't deny that the results weren't good, but part of this deal is you have to have players who buy in. And if you don't have players who buy in and you have an organization that's a disaster from ownership down, then you have no choice but to, throw your hands in the air and say, guys, I've done all I can. Either we're, playing ball or we're not. And that's what drove off Roberto Mancini as well, because he wanted players brought in and players that could fit his style. Ownership said no. He left. And so that's what opened the door for Frank. Frank ran into the exact same issues. And then Pioli, who came in after him, didn't have any more success than any of the two guys before him. So from top to bottom, Inter was an absolute disaster zone. We cannot overstate that enough. And, Frank, as he said, he got numerous gray hairs in the process of dealing with them.
I mean, Jarrett, you were holding down the fort at the station today. What was some of your, reaction to the press conference and some of the things that came out as the day went on from Frank de Boer? How did you take some of the comments he had?
The one that sticks out to me is, talking about just being a manager and just doing what he does best and not having to juggle so many balls in the air. Look, Atlanta's the kind of organization where he's going to have that opportunity where he doesn't have to wear a ton of hats unless he just wants to. You've got plenty of guys in place. They announced the coaching staff today. The only guy who's staying on is Aaron Hyde from the last staff. So that face will be familiar when it pops up on TV to do interviews potentially. But just the idea that he can coach, doesn't have to do anything else. And you've got a lot of ammunition from the Ajax days, and he knows what he's doing on that side of things. And if he doesn't have to juggle, 15 chainsaws like he's done at other places. And we had this debate this weekend on the station actually about, how much credit do you put into the other situations? And, Atlanta should be an easy gig. He'll have everything. Like, yes, that's not a bad thing. Having a really simple, effective situation, we don't punish a manager for coming into a situation where, he's going to have the best players and a support staff that's competent and ownership that backs him up. Yes, every manager would love that. You don't have to judge a manager's success by his ability to pull a rabbit out of a hat that is on fire in space. He doesn't have to create magic for it to make it work. We think just highly enough of Zidane for going into Real Madrid and managing everything and doing all of the things right. But the idea that De Boer can come in here and just coach and not have to worry about anything else, there might be some bumpy moments as everything kind of gets established. There were bumpy moments in the earlier Tata days in 2017. Sometimes it just takes time to figure out what's going to work and what's not. That's okay. They've got the faith in him, and his comfort in everything here it stuck out to me about all this, and that he could just coach.
One thing that sticks to me is the magic word here for me is culture. And that is that at Inter, Frank was asked to rebuild a culture in a completely new and different way than how they were doing things. And then after each game, he had to go sit in front of the media and answer questions for up to 2 hours where they tear every decision apart. And then at Crystal Palace, he was asked to go in and change the culture from top to bottom. And they didn't give him any time to do it. He said, hey, look, I need 6 months to build the culture with the players you have right now. Okay, done. And then if anyone wants to know if the system works, the U23s were beating the first team on a regular basis at Crystal Palace. That was part of the problem, is the first team had no confidence. And he's not asked to do that here. He's asked to come in and say, hey, look, we're press, we control the ball, we want to build youth. Oh, wow, that's all things that Frank de Boer should excel in. So I think that, that confidence really radiated today. And even amongst the fan base, when I was following along with the Facebook comments, when he fluently started dropping Spanish, I felt like it was a mic drop on his end saying, guys, everything's okay. I can fluidly switch between languages. It's no big deal. Question to question. You want to go English? You want to go Dutch, Spanish? It's no big deal. And I felt like that confidence radiated. And I saw a lot of people who were initial skeptics at the beginning of the press conference came out of the press conference feeling very solid about the decision.
Well, Nathan Pugh, I agree. He said he was very impressed with Frank de Boer. Also made me feel dumb because he fluently transitioned between two non-native languages. That is only going to help him in the locker room. He told Dukes and Bell in the afternoon that, he can speak English, he can speak Spanish, he can speak Dutch, obviously. He can understand German. He's not too comfortable speaking it. He's not going to have any problems here. He's not going to have any problems.
I imagine he can do Italian, too, if he has to.
And he mentioned that, yes. And that was something that he put a lot of time into as he went to Enter, was to learn Italian and to work on it and try to be able to speak to the media in Italian. So there's not going to be any issues with understanding and that cultural side of it. The other thing he said on Dukes and Bell that really stuck out to me was he was explaining a little bit about, Nick, where you were going with culture and having to recreate culture or rebuild culture or create culture from scratch in some cases. And he talked about at Crystal Palace how, he was tasked with coming in to try to be more like Southampton and be a European club as opposed to the club that was just trying to stay afloat and not get relegated, essentially very English. He was trying to take it to another level, and that was what he was hired to do. And he was not allowed to see that out. And honestly, when you really go back to it, it's a joke the way he was treated, where you're hired to do something that takes time, 6 months minimum, before you can really even start to get to work because you're changing that culture. And he didn't even get 6 games. That's unbelievable at this stage to do that. And it shows, you mentioned, Nick, the lack of confidence in the playing side of it, the first team roster. The way they treated Frank de Boer, it's a lack of confidence at the boardroom level in that club, and that's why they have pretty much stayed where they are, and nothing's changed.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to see what that battle is like when you are a true relegation club, just turn on Netflix and watch Sunderland Till I Die, and watch a club that is having that daily battle with trying to stay afloat. And ask yourself, okay, does this look like a team that's ready to fundamentally transform the culture? No, it's you're doing triage. That's all you're doing is, okay, can I bring in a guy who's going to get me a couple points at the next game? Or maybe we steal a point here. Maybe we steal a point there. Not, okay, we can comfortably lose a game or two and be perfectly okay. Because once you drop into that bottom 3, it's a completely different ballgame for you. And Frank de Boer, rightly or wrongly took that job. But at some point, as an ownership group, you have to say, okay, there are more systemic problems here than just the manager. Keep in mind, let's go NFL for, newer soccer fans. Bill Belichick worked for the Cleveland Browns. He got fired by the Cleveland Browns. Does that mean Bill Belichick's a bad coach? Look at the amount of rings the guy has. Clearly, he's a great coach. But there's systemic problems within some organizations that aren't going to be solved by one manager or one coach at one time. It takes time to develop, and in a relegation battle, that's not going to happen for you.
I'll toot the horn again a little bit of the coverage we had at 92.9 The Game today, because in addition to the stuff on air. We also had some interviews on digital, and we'll have a few more coming soon. But we went ahead and we got the Darren Eales interview up as quickly as we could. One, because he had some very interesting things to say about a player who wears number 10, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But he mentioned something about this that I thought was really intriguing. There are clubs and there are situations and there are teams even at clubs in different eras of that club that are just the right fit for a manager or the wrong fit. And you look at Frank de Boer here in Atlanta, it feels like the closest thing he's had to Ajax since he was at Ajax. Whereas Inter and Crystal Palace were not the right fit for him in that club because he couldn't do what he does well. That's a really interesting thing. And to me, you know, I start thinking about what we're watching at Manchester United right now. And if you compare Jose Mourinho and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer as managers, and you compare what they've done as managers, you're going to look at Mourinho's track record and you're going to say, well, obviously he would have more success, wouldn't he? Not necessarily every time. And you're going to look at a guy like Solskjaer and look at him and see, wow, he understands what it is to be Manchester United. He gets that. And now this is a team that, are they playing the best soccer in the Premier League? No, Tottenham shelled them yesterday. But they got to win. And the thing about it that has changed is the feeling around it. It feels like they're becoming Manchester United again, and it feels like they hadn't been that in a long time. Sometimes a manager is not a fit for a certain club or player roster or group. Sometimes the guy that you might not expect is that right fit. We're seeing, I think, Solskjaer right now is the right fit at Manchester United, and I think, Jarrett, we're hoping that Frank de Boer is that right fit for Atlanta United, and it looks like when you compare where he's had his greatest success to what the situation here, it looks like there's a lot of similarities there.
It does. You've got a relatively young roster at Atlanta United. Think about the guys who are older. LGP's 26, I believe now. Remetti's in his early 20s. Franco's in his early 20s. Tito, Joseph, Miguel, Joe. Well, Joseph's closer to mid-20s now, but you've got a lot of young players on the up and up coming soon, and you're going to start seeing. I think if let's say it is a 4-year contract, like it was reported by one of the Dutch websites. You get in 2-3 years down the line with this team, I think you're expecting by then this roster is going to look a lot different. Guys moving on, guys retiring, guys possibly getting sold, guys choosing to go elsewhere when their contracts run out. But you should be expecting at that point that next crop of homegrowns to be on the horizon. And frankly, I think you can afford to make a move like this the year after you win MLS Cup the way Atlanta United did. You won the Cup in your second year. I mean, that wasn't supposed to happen that quickly in the modern MLS. But you did it, and I think it gives you a bit of breathing room where you can say, Tata Martino's not coming back, and that's okay. But let's reach out and try this with Frank de Boer. He seems like he could be a absolutely perfect fit, and if it doesn't work perfectly, it's not the end of the world. Winning a cup before this, I think, really does help the organization and give them a little bit of freedom to be creative and take, I don't want to call it a chance and taking chances, but it gives them the freedom to try and push the envelope again.
Well, it makes it a little bit easier for de Boer as well, and this was something that Julian Gressel said to us on an interview that'll be coming out over on the 92.9 The Game digital page here shortly. He said, it's a situation where you're coming off a championship, and a lot of times you see teams, after having great success, get a little complacent and not have that same drive the following year, especially early. I think people said that was the case about Toronto last year. I disagree. I think they had it. I think they had it, especially in CONCACAF. Injuries derailed Toronto's season. And, okay, maybe when things went south with injuries, maybe they didn't have that same drive to bounce back because they already achieved so much. This is a different situation, Nick. This is a situation where it's not just the fact that, okay, you're coming off a championship year, everything else is the same, yeah, big whoop. This is a situation where, yeah, the big things change, the manager, and you're going to have players who are like, now this is my chance to show a new guy that I should be playing more and I should be getting this opportunity, and it freshens everything up. And I think it gives Atlanta United a little bit of an edge that they might not have had if things had continued just like they were last season.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point. And I think there couldn't have been a better time for Frank de Boer to come in. I know a lot of people would say, oh, man, it's got to be so tough to follow up after, Tata Martino's epic run. But at the same time, like you said, you bring in fresh talent. And if you are an Andrew Carleton and you are somebody who had a very rough end to last season, this is an opportunity for you to completely show out and say, hey, look, you want to play youth? I'm probably one of the top 2 best youth players you have. Get me on the field and I'll show you what I can do. George Bello, same thing. Somebody who, whether you like it or not, he, didn't get a metric ton of playing time under Tata Martino, showed that when he was on the field, he could make a difference. You don't think George Bello's sitting there looking at this opportunity like, oh, yeah, I'm ready to come in and tear it all up now. I think this is an opportunity for Atlanta to take a deep breath and say, okay, let's watch this thing get built. Because if you are patient, if you can sit back and say, all right, there will be bumps. It's going to be okay. And watch these youth players come along as we start to transition out of some of the old guard. There could be tremendous things on the horizon for Atlanta United if we have fan buy-in. And that's the only thing I'm going to say, because we have a lot of new fans and they're coming in on that championship high. If we don't start winning trophies out of the gate, just chill, relax, take a breather, because if done right, the machine is in place, the model is in place, the model works, it's been proven. Let Frank do his deal, and some great, great things could be coming out the pipeline for Atlanta United. I'm a big believer in this project, and I think he can get it done.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what this next chapter looks like, because I don't think it's going to look that dramatically different. I really don't. But I think it's going to have some new wrinkles to it, and I think it's going to have a different kind of edge to it. And I think that's a good thing, because as Julian said to us, you kind of need that year after year. And I think when teams have sustained success, sometimes you do let up a little bit when you don't have big changes. And I think that's part of the difference here, and that'll be a big thing for Atlanta sports fans and media. And I'll be really curious to see how that looks as we get into this season, because I think in soccer, we're used to it, right? We're used to these situations where you see transfer sagas and you see managers move a little more frequently, and you see a roster turnover more than you do in other sports. This is a good thing. I think it's a very good thing. I think it freshens everything up. And you also have a situation where if you're a young talent coming through, combined with a new manager who's going to look at everybody with a fresh set of eyes, you have the schedule compression and CONCACAF going on this year, where you're going to have opportunities to play maybe more than you would have in the previous 2 years. And that's if you're an Andrew Carleton, a Lagos Kunga, Chris Goslin. Guys are going to get an opportunity that maybe wasn't there before. And you're going to have a manager who has no problem playing young players, and he's made that abundantly clear throughout this process. And the team has talked about how that was a big reason why Frank de Boer was decided upon as the guy, because he has no fear of playing a young player in a situation. He's going to have those situations early in the season, especially. I keep looking at this schedule with CONCACAF and the MLS regular season in February and March. And, Jarrett, you're looking at a situation where if they advance past the round of 16, you could have 7 matches between February 21st and March 17th. That's what you're looking at here. If you are an Andrew Carlton, a George Bello, a Chris Goslin, a Lagos Kunga, an Anderson Asadu, who was picked up in the draft, a John Gallagher, a Patrick Okonkwo, a Gordon Wild, if you're any of those guys, you should be licking your chops at this opportunity, because 7 games in not quite 4 weeks, you're going to have to rotate that squad some.
I think even if you're the guys who are in the starting 11, you need to play like your back's against the wall. Just because you played an MLS Cup or played in the playoffs or played regular season last year, that don't mean diddly squat. You got a new manager coming in who might have different ideas and might rate things differently, or might rate different abilities differently. Everyone's got to be looking their chops at opportunities, and you can't go into this thinking, well, those guys are going to be looking their chops, but I did A, B, and C last year, so I'm in good shape. That's not necessarily the case. It's going to be a bit of a free-for-all, I think, in terms of some of these positions with players where you have so much positional flexibility, which is a blessing. And we're going to have to find out, who can do what, who can step up. It's why we talked a week or two ago about players that we're excited about with this. And I brought up guys like Goslin because Goslin feels like the kind of guy who could be an absolute problem in a Frank de Boer system if he can make the jump. I think he's going to get the opportunity, but he's got to grab it by the scruff of the neck, and that's not just on him. That's on a lot of these young players. They're going to grab it by the scruff of the neck and drag that job down to what they need it to be. But it's a them thing. It's not this isn't going to get handed to you. You're going to have chances to go earn it, so go earn it. First step for Goslin, by the way, would be staying healthy.
Definitely that. Let's take a quick break so we can reset. If you guys who are listening out there live have questions for us, send them our way at Soccer Down here on Twitter. We will get to them as we go. When we come back, John's not with us yet, but Nick, we're going to have to talk a little England and talk about what's going on in the Premier League and how it all relates to a certain player wearing number 10 that we know fairly well here in Atlanta. We'll get caught up on the Miguel Almiron sweepstakes, and silly season rages on across the Atlantic in Europe, in England, in every country, because it's chaos right now. We'll get caught up in all your transfer drama. Hang out with us. We'll be right back.
The average time a resume spends on an HR manager's desk is 7 seconds, and most of them are tossed aside. Now imagine if one of those resumes belonged to Yasmin, who was
living in a shelter, juggling 3 jobs. I had to be resilient. That's something that you can't teach.
We rely so much on a resume, yet it could never tell the full story of someone who
had to be independent and take initiative. And that's how I handle every project I get.
Discover new ways to develop great talent at gradsoflife.org. Brought to you by Grads of Life and the Ad Council.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Hey, hon, what you doing with your phone? Taking pictures?
No, I'm asking it questions.
Like what?
Hey, Bobo, do flowers have best friends?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, follow me. I want to show you something. Look, flowers do have best friends.
Whoa.
Some answers can only be found in nature. Discover the unsearchable. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a trail near you. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Soccer Down Here is sponsored by Apolinsky & Associates, LLC, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience. Call Steve Apolinsky at 518-350-4231 or email him at steve@aa-legal.com if you need help with a wrongful death or serious injury matter. Steve Apolinsky is rated one of the top 100 trial attorneys in Georgia, recognized as Legal Elite by Georgia Trend magazine for being one of the most effective lawyers in Georgia.
Welcome back. The Soccer Down Here, Soccer Over There crossover edition. is here for January 14th. Jason Longshore, Nick Alifi with you right now. We will have Jarrett Smith coming back with us in just a bit. John Nelson will be in a car driving back from Auburn, Alabama in a little while, and he'll join us as well. But we got to go ahead and jump into England, and we got to talk about the Premier League at the moment. We talked a little bit about Manchester United in the last segment and what's going on with them. David De Gea made a number of insane saves with his feet yesterday. I think he made 11 saves in total in the 1-0 win over Tottenham. And then you had the most delicious of counterattack passes I've ever seen from Paul Pogba to Spring Rashford. It was ridiculous. But let's talk about the other end of the table, Nick. I looked at this, and I didn't want to get too deep into it going in. Newcastle, the situation that could be upon them if everything went the way that it looked likely. Well, it did. Newcastle's in a relegation spot right now in 18th. They are 1 point behind Cardiff in 17th. And oh, wouldn't you know, Saturday, 10 a.m. our time, Newcastle hosting Cardiff in match day 23. I almost wonder if the possible Miguel Almiron transfer to Newcastle could hinge on that result.
Well, yeah, and I think you're 100% correct on that, but there's a little bit of doubt in my mind here in that from a Newcastle point of view, yes, whether they want to be a buyer of Miguel Almiron or not, that game against Cardiff City could be the tipping point for them. But I personally believe that Newcastle will not pony up the funds required to get Miguel Almiron. I just don't think it's going to happen. There's no movement at all on the sale of the club. Even if the sale gets done, will it happen in time for the January transfer window? No, it's not.
It won't. Yeah, by what I've read, and I'm learning about not just the transfer saga up close and personal right now, but potential sales of English clubs, because that factors into it. I think you could have basically an MOU that, yes, it's going down and this is going to happen, but it won't be official by the end of the transfer window because of the regulatory process and all that. So there's reportedly been some progress on it, according to some in Newcastle about this, and Kenyon's group is getting closer. There was also, and this is where I'm really getting confused and looking side-eye at Newcastle. Between most reports, it's down to somewhere between £5 million and £10 million. That's the difference. And what I'm reading is more of 5, which you're talking about Newcastle saying their number, they're not going above £20 million. That's what, 23, 24 million? That's what we're talking about cash in American dollars.
Yep.
The number that has been said here publicly starts with a 3. That's the quote that has been out there. Is Newcastle going to potentially lose $90 to $100 million next year over less than $10 million this year on a player that is he going to lead Newcastle to the top half of the table this year? No, I don't think so. But is he a player that serves a need and can keep them up and potentially keep Rafa Benitez there and potentially keep this club from getting relegated for the 3rd time in a decade? I think he is.
Well, another question comes in is, does Miguel Almiron want to be that guy in which everything, all of Newcastle's hopes rest upon his shoulders? I mean, he did a fine job of that with Atlanta United, but yeah, I think Newcastle will scuttle the deal over a stupid $5 million difference because it's Newcastle, and there's a reason why you're at the bottom of a table when you're a club like Newcastle, and that's because your ownership group tends to make very dumb decisions when the pressure mounts. And Newcastle has shown us time and time and time again that Mike Ashley has no problems making exceptionally stupid decisions when he's under pressure. So, yes, I do think he could scuttle this deal and lose a Miguel Almiron over it. If I'm Miguel Almiron and his agent, if I'm watching the Cardiff Newcastle game and I don't see, anything that I happen to like, do I go back to Darren Eales and say, hey, maybe you can hold off until summer? So now if Newcastle's your only buyer, I don't think Newcastle's the only potential buyer out there. They may be the closest at the moment, but I don't think they're the only buyer. But I stay away from Newcastle if I'm Miguel, but I think they're going to botch it just to put it out there. I don't think Newcastle has any wherewithal of where they truly are at the moment.
Yeah, it's a really tricky situation, and we mentioned the takeover bid and when it could get done and if it's going to get done. That has to factor into it if you're Ashley. And I know Mike Ashley has not spent money, and we all know this, and we know he has just been historic about not giving Rafa Benitez money to spend, but also holding to these numbers that are just not realistic and not getting deals done. It feels kind of like Nelson Rodriguez in Chicago lately. But at this point, if you're trying to sell this club and you're talking $330 million to sell right now, give or take, but that's the ballpark you're talking about. If you don't provide resources for reinforcements right now, you don't have a team, you're not guaranteed of staying up right now, period. Not even looking at the table, not even looking at future games. This quality of a squad right now, you're not guaranteed to stay up. You're risking it if you don't reinforce what you have. All right?
That's correct.
Are you going to risk not just going down, not just the business next year losing $90 or $100 million, but also affecting the value of your club? Because I think a couple things happen. You get relegated this year if you're Newcastle. Rafa Benitez says, I'm out of here. Bye. I went through it once. I brought you back immediately. You haven't changed. You're not giving me the money to get the guy that I have identified that I want to go get. I'm out. I'm not going to go through another year in the championship. And if that happens and they don't bounce back immediately, because this is the third time, and this has been discussed in the Newcastle media, you get dropped once, you come back up. Okay. You survive it. You've got some wiggle room when you go down immediately, even though the second time they went down and they came right back up, they talked about it costing them £90 million. That was the hit from being a year in the championship. You can't keep taking those hits and bouncing back. You go down a third time, and Rafa leaves, and you've went through this whole very public, you're not going to invest and you're not going to spend. I don't think you're coming back anytime soon. And I don't think you're selling the club for $330 million at that point. At some point, you're talking £5 to £10 million. And you're going to potentially lose $90 to $100 million next year on your books and lose $100 million in your sale? Are you foolish at this point?
Has Mike Ashley ever done anything to make you think that's not the case?
But this is his way out, and are you going to cost yourself? I mean, you're not going to be able to sell a championship squad, and especially a championship squad with the best manager you've had in a long time walking out the door.
Agreed.
You're going to lose at least £100 million from what you're trying to sell the club for.
Yeah. Everything you're saying makes total sense. But the truth of the matter is we don't know Mike Ashley's bank account. And
that's true.
Mike Ashley may have a red line in his bank account that says, thou shalt not go below this number. And that may be a very firm number for him. And if that's the case, and his financial advisors are saying you can only invest X amount into the club, then that's his amount. And that's all. He's not going to go below it. And judging by recent history, that seems to be a very firm number, whatever that magic number may be. But, this really comes down to, do you value Miguel Almiron enough to say, okay, we'll bite the bullet, we'll spend that extra $5 million, and we'll just all be done with it here. They may be reading into the MLS rules, and I just did say the MLS, so everyone out there can feel free to shoot me on Twitter.
Well, you said the MLS rules, so that was okay.
Correct.
That's a little different.
So they may be reading the rule book and saying, oh, well, they're limited to the certain number of players that they can have at a certain cash threshold. So we'll just wait them out toward the end of the window and see what we can get.
I'm glad you opened that door.
Okay, well, if that's the case, then they may be in for a very, very bumpy ride.
I'm really glad you opened that door because I was a little surprised at some of the national response to the whole situation about Pity Martinez, Miguel Almiron, the whole deal. Felipe Cardenas, our good friend, tweeted out this morning, Carlos Bocanegra was non-committal when I asked about Pity Martinez. He said they have their team set right now and that, quote, there are always rumors in the transfer window. Paul Tenorio tweeted out and said, this just feels like an attempt to pretend they don't have 4 DPs as they try to negotiate a sale of Almiron and maintain some leverage. I'm baffled by this. I'm sorry. Yes, you can't have 4 designated players on your roster. No, you're not going to. To say that you maintain some leverage, here's the leverage. And I'm going to ask everybody to go to the 92.9 The Game Facebook page and watch the interview that we did with Darren Eales and listen to his comment about we don't have to sell. You want some leverage? That's the leverage.
Yep.
You want the player? Spend the money. You don't? Okay. They're not going to sell. Let me ask you this, Nick. Here's your situation. You don't get the deal you want to get for Miguel Almiron, and that's the part you can't control. You don't know what other people are gonna spend. You don't get the number you want. As Darren has made clear, not just today, but consistently, you don't have to sell. Atlanta United is not going to balance the books with this deal. They're not worried about that. They have an owner that understands the long-term play here. If the number's not right, they don't have to sell. How do you solve the designated player issue? Do you honestly think that there is going to be a problem finding a club to take Ezequiel Barco on loan for 6 months until the summer transfer window? And if you have to build in an option into it, you do. Do you really think that you're not going to be able to figure that out at that stage? I don't think it's a tough issue at all.
No, just go check out Dirty South Soccer. They had a piece on that where they said that Independiente was allegedly asking for a short-term loan for Ezequiel Barco that the club allegedly turned down. Now we don't know how firm of a denial that was. If it was, hey, sit tight, we'll have an answer for you in a few days or whatever. But I think it would be very, very easy to move Ezequiel Barco for 6 months. I think it would probably be a great thing for him to, have those first team minutes to get back in the swing of being, having that pressure on him of having to perform before he comes back into the, to the mix here at Atlanta. But no, if anyone out there who thinks that Darren Eales has not completely thought this through, what happens if risk management 101 dictates that we have to assume that there would be no buyer for Miguel Almiron. What then? So let's say we bring in a Pity Martinez and we have Miguel Almiron and we have Joseph Martinez. What do we do with Ezequiel Barco? You don't think he hasn't thought that through, that the brain trust at Atlanta United, who has gone step for step so far and come up aces, hasn't thought that one through? I guarantee you they have a scenario, a flow chart hanging up in someone's office of if this, then this. Guaranteed. So I think the move for Ezequiel Barco would probably be the easiest deal. I mean, we may see Miguel Almiron here until June or July, which I think most of the fan base would be perfectly okay with.
And the other thing that was mentioned in our interview with Darren, and Frank de Boer's mentioned it consistently since he's been talking about what is about to happen for him in Atlanta, CONCACAF Champions League. You want the strongest squad you can possibly have there. And if you have to make a decision, and I've been a huge supporter of what Ezequiel Barco brings to the table, but if you have to make a decision between Miguel Almiron or Ezequiel Barco and what they bring to the table right now, Miguel Almiron makes you a better team. Flat out. And that would be your decision because of the designated player rule. It's not Ezequiel Barco or player X, Y, or Z. It's 4 guys for 3 spots if the Pity Martinez deal is done. And Ezequiel Barco would be the odd man out. He would be loaned out. And if you go into CONCACAF Champions League with Pity Martinez, with Miguel Almiron, with Joseph Martinez, that gives you a pretty good shot. And that is a huge priority for this club. I don't think it is the scenario that anybody wants to play out, because then you're going to go into the summer and you're going to have, I think, a lot of clubs interested in Miguel Almiron at that point. And his agent told Paraguayan radio, look, Newcastle's not the only club in England that is interested. I think there's still going to be a lot of clubs right now interested if Newcastle can't get this deal done for themselves. And they should, and they look like fools if they don't. And I think if they don't do it, they're going to lose their manager, and they run the risk of being in the championship for a good while. But if they don't do it, I don't think Atlanta has no leverage, as some people have tried to say. The leverage is they keep Miguel Almiron for a little while longer and have a stronger squad in CONCACAF Champions League. That's not bad leverage.
No, it's not bad leverage at all. And keep in mind that in summer, the pocketbooks open just a tish wider than they do in the winter window, where you have teams that are either in a relegation battle or they're in like the 6th, 7th, 8th spot in their league, and they are desperately trying to get into the top 3 or 4 for that coveted Champions League spot. So you have a much smaller audience you're working with in the winter window. During the summer window, it's absolutely, the brakes go off and people go nuts, even with financial fair play hanging like the sword of Damocles. But, if you hang on to Miguel Almiron until summer, you may see, not just, 3 or 4 teams in England. You may see 5 or 6 if he's performing exceptionally well at that point. And then you start opening up Ligue 1 and then Serie A even. The sky's the limit at that point. So don't fret if nothing gets done in the winter window, because the winter window is known for a couple of things, one of which is that very, very spicy rumors come up. They drag all the way to the 29th, 30th. Oh, wait, no. Okay, it's not getting done. And then something will get worked out either via loan or via, some deal that pops up in the summer, like you saw with Borussia Dortmund and Chelsea for Christian Pulisic. So things will get done, but it's going to happen on Atlanta United's timeline. And I wouldn't freak out. Everyone knows that I'm a big believer in "quote unquote" the model. The model, you have to abide by the model. This is part of the model, and every club out there that deals with some sort of financial limiter, either via salary cap here with MLS or with the roster restrictions with DP slots, or in Germany where you have very tight financial regulations that you have to go by, or your club is broke. Things get done and business is still handled. It just depends on whether or not your owner is an idiot. And Newcastle has proven time and time again that Mike Ashley is an idiot. And Arthur Blank is very, very intelligent. And I think he has said, hey, look, I'm happy to spend the cash. And I know that and trust that Darren, you brought me a title. I'm fully committed to watching to see you play this thing out. So if you're an Atlanta United fan right now, just sit tight. It will be okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to handle this, and what I want to, and I'll dig deeper into this, and we'll talk about it on tomorrow's SDH in the morning, but I look back to when Seattle had Freddie Montero and loaned him out, and that opened up a designated player slot. When they loaned him out, they actually signed him to a multi-year contract extension when they did that loan, and they loaned him out for a full year. That was... there was a different time in MLS, but I've seen some speculation that you can't loan a player out and clear a designated player slot because of the contract and because of transfer, this, that. Look, the thing about a designated player slot is you have 3 of them. And if you loan a player out, and I don't know why this would be the case, but if you loan a player out, it doesn't really matter if the other club is paying the salary or not. They're not on your roster. They're not filling a designated player slot if they are loaned out. And you look at how it's worked with international slots, which, is a little bit different. But when you loan a player out that would be in an international slot, they're not on your roster. They're not in an international slot. So if you loan Ezequiel Barco out, because he would be the one who would be loaned out in this scenario. If you loan him out, he's not in a designated player slot. So then you could add Pity Martinez, and there you go. I really think that when people say that Atlanta United has no leverage because of all the talk about Pity Martinez and they're going to bring him in, and then other clubs know like they have to sell. I think now you should understand that you don't. You don't have to sell. You're going to have to clear a spot if Pity Martinez is going to play in Atlanta to start the first half of the year until the next transfer window. Yes. And you're going to have to figure that out. But you don't have to sell Miguel Almiron for a cut rate number. If you value him at a certain number, that's the number you want. You don't have to sell him for anything less. That's where Atlanta United is right now. It's a different spot than I think we've ever seen in Major League Soccer. I don't think you've had a club in this situation, not even the dollar figure which we're talking about, just in this situation where, look, they don't have to sell. They can, one, they don't need the money. Two, they can figure out another way to get this done because of where they are, and I think the level of complexity that they're dealing with. They're playing chess, where the rest of the league, I think at times, is playing checkers. I hope it changes the league. I hope teams start to look at this and say, well, why didn't we think of that? Why didn't we try to do something like that when a situation came up for us? I hope this changes the mindset because I think it pushes MLS a little bit more into that true international market for players down the road.
And that's something that people are going to have to remember. Because, guys, if you can just refresh me really quick. Darren Eales, he worked at a previous decent-sized club before, right? What was that club?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
Inverness Caledonian Thistle, yes.
Yes.
That's correct, yes. And he's somebody who's worked with clubs in the past, of decent repute, your Real Madrids of the world. I don't think Darren has a problem at all dealing with the Newcastles of the world. This is not something that's new to him. And keep in mind that when you talk about, for all of us out there who have become fly-by-night MLS legal scholars, that we actually have someone who is a lawyer running our team. So it's not necessarily what the rules say, but it's what the rules don't say sometimes. And if you don't believe that Darren hasn't looked at these rules and said, hey, here's how we can navigate X, Y, and Z, no problems, no questions asked, easy, Loctite legal argument, I don't know what to tell you. So, and for those who are, concerned, well, why can't we just, sign these players to, stupid long-term deals? I just think that we need to realize that when it comes to the players who come through this team, we have to look at it sort of like college football, where we have that one player who we all remember from our favorite college team that we love, and it just comes time for them to move on. And Miguel Almiron is in that spot right now, but it's not like he's in his senior year and, oh my God, what are we going to do, right? Let's think of Miguel theoretically in his junior year at whatever your favorite college of choice is. We don't have to move him. We don't have to bench him. We don't have to send him anywhere. The roster spot is there for him if he wants to play. And the player's role is a part of this, the player's mindset. If the player wants to stay, he can stay. And from what it sounds like, neither Miguel nor his agent have said, Atlanta United, get us out. Looks like they've said, we want a deal that's good for Miguel. We want a deal that's good for the club. Let's work this out. And it seems like there's a very positive relationship between the two sides. So what's the rush? I mean, Ezequiel had great moments in the playoffs where he did yeoman's work, in ball control and, against New York City and against the caffeinated energy devils of New Jersey. But, he's had a great time. But if he needs to go on loan, he's got to go on loan. Them's the breaks. Them's the business.
And so, how many times at clubs around the world do we see talented young players go out on loan at this age for a change of scenery, for a different experience? And in Ezequiel's case, if it's to go back to an Independiente who just lost a ton of players and potentially could lose even more, there's rumors of Independiente players, more of them coming to MLS. If he goes back to Independiente and gets to play consistently with them and for 6 months and does very well and comes back to Atlanta with increased confidence, is that a bad thing?
No. I mean, if anything, all you've done is you've allowed a player to go somewhere else in a situation where he would feel extraordinarily comfortable, where he's revered by the fan base. And, I mean, just keep in mind, on the way out, he donated part of his transfer cut to help build soccer fields there. I mean, the guy left with a pretty positive impression. It's not exactly like they chased him out of town with pitchforks and torches and whatnot. But you're also increasing his value because he will yet again get first team minutes in a league that has a lot of eyeballs. And so when he comes back to Atlanta, then his transfer valuation, if he's played well, has gone up. And it's a win for everyone. And this kind of deal is done every single day for teams over in Europe and South America. So this is old hat. This is nothing.
This is common. The reason it's different here is because of the designated player rule and being forced to do it for a different reason than you see in other leagues. Now, we've had a couple questions, and I want to rule this part out for the most part because I think it makes it more complicated, and I don't know how possible it truly is. Tafka TLC asked, could Atlanta buy out Barco's contract and execute a new deal? That's a $5.8 million solution to have all 4 players. Josh Eisenberg said, could we get creative on the Joseph contract negotiations, get him on a TAM deal for this season that bumps up to what he needs for the following season? I don't think you could do either, and I don't think you need to either, and that's the bigger thing here. Could you buy Barco's contract out and execute a new one? I don't know if you want to do that because of agent fees and this and that, and I don't know if you're going to be able to avoid the transfer fee still counting on the deal that brought him in. I don't know that level of MLS rules, and it's never come up. I think the easier solution is, as we've said, to loan him out. I don't think you're going to be able to figure out how to have all 4. Joseph taking a pay cut for this year on a new deal to bump him up in a big way in the next couple of years. I think Joseph loves the club. I think Joseph loves being in Atlanta, but I don't know if you're going to do that. I don't know if you need to. I think we're trying to get a little too creative with those types of solutions.
Let's bring it into a European. Let's bring it into a European perspective really quick, and then Jared, I'll let you. I'll shut up, and Jared can jump in. When Juventus brought in Cristiano Ronaldo, they had to clear a ton of money in order to be in financial fair play requirements, and so they moved Gonzalo Higuain to AC Milan. And Milan desperately needed a striker. They were in a similar boat as Independiente, where they had players who were bailing, either not performing or just bailing, and they had to bring in some talent up top in order to try to maintain a Champions League spot. Now, Gonzalo Higuain wants out of Milan. So Juventus cannot bring him back at the moment because then his salary would hit their books, so they have to move him. Now they're trying to get a loan to Chelsea, and then here's where this all comes in, is that they're trying to stipulate with Chelsea, hey, look, the loan has to be for this specific amount of time at X dollars. You have to cover this. You have to cover that. They're adding a whole bunch of sub-items to that loan. It's normal business, and it's something that gets done on a regular basis. So that's why this is something where I don't think it's that big of an issue when it comes to we have to buy him out or, buy out Barco or somehow do something creative with Barco's contract. I think this situation matches up pretty well with what's happening at Juve, where you have a super talented player coming in. You only have so many starting positions. You have a player who wants to start, needs to start, so you move them to a position where they can while retaining the rights. That's the important thing. Orlando City won't get Barco's rights. Nashville, Miami, Philly, and we still control his rights. And as long as we put in, the appropriate qualifiers in the loan has to be for until June or July. then we'll be A-okay. Now, the one interesting thing to this is you need to structure the loan at a point where you have the ability to recall him at any point. And not just that, but I would personally structure the loan through the summer window, the entire summer window, just so that way you don't get caught in a position where, you have Barco's loan end in June, then Barco's contract hits your roster, Atlanta United, and now you're in a pickle where, yes, you must move someone immediately. Then the teams over in Europe would have you over the barrel. My loan idea would be push it to the end of the summer transfer window. Give yourself that latitude that if you need to work something out, you can. It's not a big deal. And by then, you'd probably have enough suitors lined up for Almiron where you could have your own price worked out prior to that window.
Yeah, good points. Jarrett, thoughts on Atlanta United's supposed lack of leverage when it comes to Miguel Almiron and getting the right deal that they want to get in terms of transferring him out?
Most of my issue with all this is, I had a teacher once tell me we should shave daily with Occam's razor. It doesn't, instead of creating, black magic ways in which we can manipulate money left, right, this, that, and the other. I get it. I get people want to find ways to keep everyone on the roster. The answers here may be one or twofold. Someone's getting sold, someone's getting loaned. You can try and manipulate dark matter and dark energy all you want to try and flip it around. At some point, though, it's making my head hurt. As far as I'm concerned, someone's getting sold or someone's getting loaned. That's it. I just, unless something weird happens, my brain's hurting from dealing with all of this. Everyone trying to figure out a way to flip money around and, convert money, flip it to the yuan, dig it underground, let it turn into firelight or recycle it, send it around Mars 2 or 3 times, let it build up some radiation, come back, and it's something else. I don't know what in the blue hell we're doing. But at the end of the day, I don't know what happens. I don't know if Miguel's going to go. I don't know, if it's Barco that gets loaned or I don't even know anymore. It's silly season. It is a lot of fun. But, man, MLS math just kicks you in the gut sometimes.
Well,
there's that.
Well, this is something where, I think a lot of teams in Europe are having an eye-opening moment where they're working with Atlanta United and they're maybe used to working with a Vancouver or, a Toronto or a New England Revolution. And we got a pretty good player at a stupid low fee. Well, now that's not the case. Wait a minute. What's going on here? And, they're having a moment of reckoning where they realize that there's a team in this league now that understands, how the transfer market works from top to bottom, how the roster can be constructed accordingly. And this is something where, there's going to be speed bumps for other teams like Newcastle who think they can come in and fleece a team like Atlanta and say, well, we need this player for, $10 million. Well, that's okay. We wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors in relegation. This is an eye-opening moment, and for MLS fans, not only, Jarrett, to your point, do we have to look at, MLS, trigonometry 101 when it comes to just signing a basic player. Now we also have to factor in, European economics and, which club is at a position to buy at which rate and which teams are only looking to bring in loan players and what forth. It is mind-bending, and it is like warping space-time in order just to get a basic transfer done. And it's something that MLS, the Don Garber and the board will have to figure out how to simplify that process, because not every team, and I'm looking at you, Philadelphia, and I'm looking at you, Montreal and LAFC and LA Galaxy, not everyone else knows how to navigate this window seamlessly. And they're going to have to figure out a way to make it easier and more economically viable for these teams to be in this situation, because not everyone has an Arthur Blank who can just eat that salary if that transfer doesn't happen. So in order to make it where these other teams can sort of, okay, yeah, we can play, maybe they do have, for lack of a better term, a roster IR spot where you can drop a designated player who is in the transfer portal down to, a spot where they can't play for you, but at the same time, they're not counted against your cap. The DP spot gets freed up. there are 500 different ways to do it, but that's something that I think MLS will have to address going down the road, outside of just opening up, hey, every team can have 4 DPs.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation, and I'm looking back because the closest thing that I can find in MLS history is the 2013 Seattle Sounders. So 2013, coming into this stage, January of 2013, the Sounders at that time had 3 designated players. They had Freddie Montero, they had Mauro Rosales, they had Christian Tiffert, and Showery Joseph came over from them in February. Well, they loaned Freddie Montero to clear that spot. Oh, and we have a call-in from John Nelson, who is just jumping into the queue. John, are you there? Okay. Hold that thought, John. We're talking about the loaning designated player conundrum that we are facing in Atlanta at the moment if Pity Martinez is coming. The 2013 Seattle Sounders are the closest thing that we have to this. They came into the 2013 year with Mauro Rosales, Christian Tiffert, who they ended up buying out, but at this stage of the year was still on a designated player deal. They added Showery Joseph in February. They had Freddie Montero. They loaned him out to Millonarios in Colombia. Then in the summer window, he was loaned to Sporting Lisbon and eventually purchased. Why? So they could add Obafemi Martins in March of 2013. And then, oh yeah, by the way, in the summer, they signed Clint Dempsey. They had to clear space to do that. They had to clear designated player spots to do that. They did it in 2 ways. They loaned Montero out. They then bought out Tiffert because he only played 12 games for the club, and it didn't really work out. And they went and they did business. And they added Obafemi Martins after the loan of Montero, and they added Clint Dempsey after the buyout of Tiffert and after another loan of Montero. It can be done. Now, we'll see how the LA Galaxy deal with it. They have 4 designated players under contract right now. And according to reports, Roman Alessandrini does not want to leave. He doesn't want to go to Parma, which is a club he's been linked to. The Dos Santos brothers, who knows what's going on with them? And Zlatan was just signed to a designated player deal. He's not going anywhere. We'll see how they deal with it. But it looks like, according to all the statements that are out there and everything that's being said, Atlanta United is not in a situation where they feel like they have to sell Miguel Almiron, and they'll deal with that situation as it comes to it. They have the end of the transfer window for European clubs, which is January 31st, and they have a roster compliance date of March 1st. Carlos Bocanegra made it very clear to say that today in the press conference. They've got time to figure this out.
Oh, is that my cue?
And hello, John Nelson. Yes.
Okay. No, and when you were mentioning Tiffert, the only thing that popped into my head was half of the duo from Squeeze, but that was just...
I forgot Christian Tiffert played in this league. He came over from Kaiserslautern in 2012 to Seattle, signed as a designated player in the summer window, July of 2012, played 12 matches, and he was bought out of his contract on March 2nd, right before Obafemi Martins was brought in. That was a bit of an upgrade for the Sounders at that time.
I'm thinking just a
little bit.
But no, it's. I find it amusing at times, just how many different ways people try to sit there and ask either Darren or Carlos about players and contract statuses and statuses.
I believe it is statuses.
And getting the answer that we all know that they're going to get. But I mean, I don't know if, do we give them credit for continuing to ask the question, knowing what the answer is?
I don't know. I don't think anybody knows what the answer is, though. That's the thing, is I think where we're at is I don't think anybody really knows the answer. We're in uncharted territory. I mean, let's be real. Because even with that Sounders scenario that did happen in 2013 and you had to move a lot of pieces around, you weren't talking about a sale of a player at this type of number. That hasn't happened in this league. So this is a whole different scenario.
And I mean, honestly, we've heard discussions of, right, so who is technically still in play as far as all of the talk that we've for players for Almiron?
You are, well, Newcastle is the one that's being talked about. Let's do this while we have a second. Let's reset right here.
Thank you.
Let's take a quick break. We have people who are dying to get into the call to join this combined soccer down here, soccer over there, crossover episode extravaganza. So
like
we're going to take a
Homicide, Law and
break.
Order?
Pretty much. We're going to take a break so I can try to juggle all of this at once. You guys hang out who are listening. If you have tweets, send them our way on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. We'll be right back in a minute.
Sweet strawberry icing. You're in Goodwill, and just past that vintage denim jacket you spot miniature donut earrings. You lean in. Ah, that's the scent of shopping success. Because at Goodwill, every item you buy funds local job training and more. So bring home those donut earrings and bring home so much good to your community. Goodwill. Bring good home. Brought to you by Goodwill and the Ad Council.
Soccer Down Here is sponsored by Apolinski and Associates, LLC, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience. Call Steve Apolinski at 518-350-4231 or email him at steve@aa-legal.com if you need help with a wrongful death or serious injury matter. Steve Apolinski is rated one of the top 100 trial attorneys in Georgia, recognized as legal elite by Georgia Trend magazine for being one of the most effective lawyers in Georgia.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath.
He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties.
He knows he's a pretty big deal. Look at this little face. How could you not love him?
Hamilton the Pug, Instagram star and shelter pet. Amazing adoption stories start in shelters. Visit theshelterpetproject.org to find a pet near you. Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Yes, that snazzy rejoin. If you have not heard Soccer Over There, that is the Soccer Over There rejoin, because this is a crossover edition with people driving all over the Southeast and people saying, hey, I want to join that party, like Joe Patrick. What's up, Joe?
I really just bumped my way into this party, didn't I?
You just knocked on the door and it opened, and it's like that commercial with the one party that's all lame and stuff, and the other party that's super cool. You knocked on the right door.
Nice, yeah. I sent myself an invitation to your party, and yeah.
Hey, you never know.
I assume John was in Auburn negotiating Gus Malzahn's buyout.
Maybe so. I don't know how much success he had on that, though. Maybe he's still negotiating. We're not sure.
Still negotiating.
Yeah, I'm juggling chaos, so I apologize in advance, but I'm doing the best.
It's because Jason had such a relaxed day where he didn't have to do anything for 10 hours.
Yeah, exactly. He had
know.
nothing to do. No appearances.
Might as well just add some more chaos to it. So Joe, basically, let's get you. I think you've been listening, but just to reset where we are, we've talked about leverage. We've talked about what Atlanta United can do with the multitude of designated players that it appears that they will have when a deal with Pity Martinez is finalized or announced, or however that goes down. And there's been questions about do Atlanta United do they actually have leverage? Is there a way for them to make any of this work and not get hosed in the transfer market? I think there is, and I think you're probably going to have to talk about a loan situation. And I cited the 2013 Seattle Sounders situation where they loaned Freddie Montero and ended up selling him, but they loaned him to create space for Obafemi Martins and then later for Clint Dempsey. Kind of worked out. What are your thoughts on all of that as we open training camp on the field tomorrow with Atlanta United, Joe? I mean, how do you think all this gets sorted out?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all pretty clear. You had, like you just laid it out there. You've got your 3 DPs, and you've got another one coming in. So you need to get rid of one, obviously, and we want to sell Miguel. But if we can't do that, then what is the option? And yeah, people want to try to devise all these crazy ways you could possibly do it, but the only way you're going to do it is by sending Ezequiel Barco on loan. And where I have trouble kind of deciphering the ambition isn't the right word of the club, but how much they're willing to spend is this is the case. So Barco is on, what is he on? Like 1.5 million, something like that, $1.5 million a year.
Last year, yes, I believe that was the number. Plus whatever in terms of its cap hit, whatever that transfer fee spread out over the lifetime of the contract ends up affecting.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So they can loan him, and you were totally right, Jason. You loan him, and no matter basically what the other team, what portion of his salary they want to pay, you're going to open up the designated player slot, the international slot, all that stuff.
It's a slot. It's not affecting cap space or anything like that. It's a slot. If he's not there, he's not there.
Correct. And the thing for me is that so he has this $1.5 million contract or whatever. He is owed that by Atlanta no matter what happens. So if Atlanta could in theory recoup all 1.5 million of that, if Independiente would pay 100% of his salary to have him back, you probably do that in a heartbeat, to be perfectly honest. But the reason he came to Atlanta is because he could never get that money from Independiente. Exactly. They just don't have that kind of money. Especially they're not going to have that kind of money if it's all just a sunk cost. There's no inherent value to selling him on at the end. But the issue is how much money can you get from another club to chip into his salary before it makes it financially reasonable for you and feasible for you to go ahead and do that deal and basically just pay for him not to be there, essentially. And you can justify it in numerous ways. You could say, okay, well, if we have to pay $500,000 of his salary, for if we're talking a half-year loan here, you could say, okay, well, that's like the same as paying Pity Martinez $500,000 more than we were going to pay him. Or you could say that's just like taking $500,000 off of a transfer fee that we might get from Miguel Almiron. So you can kind of justify it in certain ways. I do tend to think the more I consider it, I do tend to think that Atlanta would be willing to take that hit, because what we've seen from this club is that they are not so concerned with keeping like a positive cash flow, like keeping the bank balance, above a certain point at any given time. They're willing to kind of live in the red, so to speak, as long as they have that inherent value still live and well at the back end. So an example of that is these transfer fees that they've been spending to bring in guys like Ezequiel Barco, Miguel Almiron, Pity Martinez. These guys are the most expensive transfers, some of the most expensive transfers that this league has ever seen. And so people think that means Atlanta is spending a lot of money. And while, yes, they are at the time, and maybe they're in a certain deficit on their the balance budget right now, those players have value that they're going to be sold for more than they were bought for, or, in most cases, you hope for that. And they're not on huge salaries because they're younger players. You're not taking a player that's already on a big wage. So it's smart spending. And I think that if it makes financial sense for Atlanta United to take a short-term hit on, 6 months of Ezequiel Barco, basically paying him to be on loan somewhere else, then I think they might do that. The more I think about it, the more I'm convinced that it's a realistic option for them. And I think that, this report that came out from TYC Sports about Independiente reaching out for a loan, I think that's just, it makes sense for Atlanta to turn that down right now. Like you wouldn't you wouldn't send Barco on loan until you knew for sure that that Miguel Almiron was staying. So they still want to make that deal. But if they see that it's not going to happen, then maybe they go back to Independiente or somebody else. But I could definitely see it happening.
Yeah, and let's get a couple things squared away too on mechanics of that side of it. Again, I don't think that's the plan here. I don't think that's what.
I don't either. Yeah.
That's not the idea, but that might be the necessity. Now a couple of things. The Argentine Superliga gets back in action this weekend with a couple of games, and these are more makeup games from the first half of the season. They went on a summer break. River Plate has a match on Saturday scheduled. San Lorenzo and Huracan on Sunday. River Plate plays again on Wednesday. These are games that were rescheduled due to all the Copa Libertadores madness and the Club World Cup side of it. They don't get back into normal schedule until January 25th. Another thing to keep in mind that is different when you're talking about Argentina is their transfer window does not close on January 31st. It closes on February 20th. That gives you a little more time to work things out. And that loans are affected here too. So, as Joe said, you don't have to take a loan right now because Independiente's made an offer. You can go through this whole transfer window, see what happens, and then you do have an option to loan an Ezequiel Barco back to a club in Argentina, Independiente, where he played, if you need to do that, and it all works out with the transfer windows. Now, I do agree, and this is a question I want to go kind of around the table, and I will start with Nick on this one. Five Stripe Stunner, Adam asked this, and this was also a conversation that I've had with other people as this has gone on. Adam says, as normal as it may be elsewhere, I feel some folks would worry that a Barco loan would indicate that we're struggling to develop young talent. It would be an interesting situation that would need, I think, some explanation, and it's not typical. But, Nick, as we said, this does happen in situations, and the MLS rules make it far more likely here, no matter how many lawyers Atlanta has or hires. It might be the necessity here, and I think it could be sold that way.
Yeah, and I think that's the key thing here is that Darren would just come out and, just throwing the tea leaves out there to see how they fall. I would just say that Darren would come out and say, look, this is normal business for European clubs, and that he'd probably list about 6 or 7 examples and say, we have a plan. The plan is working exactly as we thought it would. Ha, ha, ha. As he trolls his evil mustache, and then, goes about business and just keeps it moving. I personally believe that the fan base would have to, the fan base may have a little trouble swallowing the pill. They may look at this and say, well, this is a problem that, Atlanta United should have, foreseen, that this is something where our system has failed. And it's not a sign of any of that. If anything, it just goes to show that we have a player who's highly rated. And in this particular window, that $30 million fee, there may not be a club at the moment that is ready to pay that. Now in the summer, that's a completely different animal. Now you may have clubs that are more than happy to pay that amount, but just right now in this particular window, you may have certain clubs that say, hey, I'm happy to pay $30 million. Some that say, hey, I can only pay about 15 to 20 now. And financial fair play is going to play a role in that. And I guarantee you, Darren has shot down deals of loans with obligations to buy and options to buy and so forth, because those get peddled a dime a dozen by, even the largest of clubs. So I think that this is part of the model. It's okay. It's part of the business. It's not a failure to develop talent. That the talent will start becoming more evident as the more competitive ATL UTD2 becomes. But then we will start seeing, here's that whole chunk of talent that we've been hearing about from our academy. Now it's coming to fruition. So I think that will be more of the true gauge of our depth and youth is the success of ATL UTD2 and players to get sold and loaned out from there more so than players who get loaned out from the first team.
Okay, John, let's go into where Nick leaves us off with ATL UTD2 and that side of it. One thing about developing young talent that will be different in this scenario is the beginning of the season where you could have 7 matches over that month time frame with Herediano, and if you get past them, Monterrey, plus your opening league matches, is you're going to see a lot of young talent playing in those league matches. So this type of move would be backed up by minutes for young talent in league matches in this run of play. So maybe that's how you can sell this and explain it a little bit more. That's part of the explanation.
Yeah, and I think that, to Nick's point, I think that it's just a part of the growing education of what Atlanta United fans are going to be experiencing. Because when you are a team that is as branded internationally as Atlanta United is right now, you're going to have situations like this. So I think that it's going to be an interesting development for ATL UTD2. I think that it's going to have all of these different tentacles that for those of us who have followed the game, we've seen, and now it's the first opportunity for Atlanta fans to follow it in this particular dynamic with all of these moving parts. And to Nick's point, this is not, if a player is loaned out, it's not an indictment on the player. It's just, what numbers or what have you. But I am looking forward to seeing how things develop and are rolled out with ATL UTD2, where all of this dynamic is concerned, because it's all of these different pieces to the whole that contribute to the success of everything working your way up toward the first team.
Yeah, and another one of our digital pieces that'll be coming out over at 92.9 The Game is an interview that Mike Conti and I did with Tony Annan, and we talked about the academy and ATL UTD2 and those links and how you're going to see more young players sign professional deals, whether it's a homegrown deal or a USL deal or whatever. It's a professional deal. It's an opportunity to make a living at this game. I think the worry about a Barco loan specifically, about developing young talent, it could come up, and I think it will take some explanation, Jarrett, on why you would have to loan Barco and how the club is going to benefit from it if you have to go down that road. I'm still not convinced that that's where you go, but is there any other scenario that you see, Jarrett, in being able to deal with the situation with Miguel Almiron trying to command a certain figure? His agent, according to him, has negotiated personal terms that everybody's on the same page about with Newcastle. Don't know about any other clubs, but he said Newcastle, yeah, we're good. Salary number's good. We're fine. But it's the transfer fee. Do you see any other scenario? Do you think another club comes into play? How do you predict this is going to go down?
I'm not sure, but I think it's going to keep going for a while. We may not get an answer until the end of January. And it's going to be awkward at times, I think, for everybody. And the closer we get to the end of January, the more antsy everyone's going to get, especially on the fan side of things. And I understand, because you're going to be in a situation now where at that point, February 21st is your first game against Herediano. That's going to be less than a month when the transfer deadline ends. So you might only have a squad settled for 20-some-odd days, by the time you play your first CONCACAF Champions League match. Totally possible that happens. Whether or not they actually get everything decided, or how it all gets decided, I'm not sure. I think, there are other clubs that are going to be interested. I think as January rolls along, people who are able to make teams who are able to make moves and teams that are not able to make moves, and somebody hands in a shock transfer request, how the league plays out, who's falling apart, who's picking up pace. The teams that pop up in the waiver wire, in the rumor mills, I think they're going to keep changing.
Yeah, Joe, let's put a cap on this with the big picture side of it. So this is a deal and this is a situation that, Seattle in 2013 had elements of it. The Galaxy have elements of it right now. But this is a scenario that we've never truly seen in this league's history. And this is, I think, a situation that all parties, whether you are Miguel Almiron and his representation, whether you're Atlanta United, and whether you're Major League Soccer, want to see play out to the best fortunes for everybody, because it will truly benefit the league going forward. These are the things that I think the league needs to look at on the whole. And in your mind, looking at the league right now, are there enough clubs that are thinking about business like Atlanta United to see major changes in the way rosters are constructed, to see designated player rules change, to see TAM rules change? Or is Atlanta completely the outlier and nobody else is pushing the league forward in the same way? Where do you see it going? There is a CBA coming up in a couple of years.
Yeah, you're right. There is. And I don't know. From my perspective, I do kind of see it as Atlanta United is a bit of an outlier in this respect. I feel like a lot of clubs are getting on to the youth development side. I feel like that's the way, that's kind of, if there's a collective mindset around the league in terms of ownership and where investment is going, I think you're definitely seeing it there. And to be perfectly honest, I'm not sure how many MLS owners want to invest the way Arthur Blank is investing in this team. And I think that this whole situation of what's going on, you're totally right that it's extremely unique. In fact, I don't know if we've maybe ever seen something like this happening before in front of our own eyes. And that's, I think, why it's hard to analyze, because we don't really have like a best practice to kind of look back on or a test case to kind of see how this situation typically unfolds. So, yeah, it's going to be fascinating. And can you imagine the transfer deadline ends, well, the European transfer deadline ends in 2.5 weeks. That is not very far away. Can you imagine us all sitting around our TV on a Thursday afternoon watching the seconds tick down and seeing one of our players in his future in limbo? I mean, that would be captivating television. I mean, the transfer window is always captivating, but I mean, it's just amazing to me that this club is now actually a big player in the global transfer market and kind of the way that some things are going to shake out, especially in the biggest, most popular league in the world, the Premier League. It's just a bit surreal. And I can't wait to see what happens, but I'd be lying to you if I felt like I had a strong inclination of which way this is going to go, because right now, I really don't have any idea. So,
Joe, are you telling me that we need to plan for an afternoon transfer day deadline special like all these other networks?
Complete with
January
Big Ben
31st?
chimes.
we might have to do that. Yeah.
Is this where we're at? Or we're going to have to be watching? Nick, I'm sure you'll be on board, because that will be a Soccer Over There special for sure. Yeah. If we have to watch NBC Sports Network and somebody have a feed of Sky and somebody have a BBC feed, and wait a minute, that's Miguel Almiron's agent's car. I mean, are we going to have to do this?
Get some car window interviews going.
Oh, yeah. As long as it's not Harry Redknapp.
Oh, wow. That's where we're at. Cairo on Twitter with the question. I'm going to turn it into a question. If you're able to get, and he says 8 to 10 more million for Almiron in the summer window, I don't think it'd go up quite that much. But if you're able to get your 30 plus, let's say, in the summer, and you keep him for CONCACAF Champions League, what makes it worth it? Is it just the money? Do you have to win CONCACAF Champions League? If you don't win it, is it a failure? What makes it worth it to you, Nick, if you keep Miguel in this window, you loan Barco out, you bring in Pitti because you don't want to lose the South American Player of the Year, and you go into the first half of the year, that's what you're going to have. What do you have to do in that first half of the year for it to be worth it?
I want the money. The money and proof that the model works. Because if you are...
Just hold out for the cash.
Just hold out for the cash. And the reason being, and I know that there are people who are trophy hunting who would probably say, okay, idiot, why not the trophy? And that's very justifiable. But the important thing here, and I preach this all the time, is that the model has to work. Because if you are the next Pitti Martinez and you look at Atlanta United and they come into your living room and they say, hey, we can move you to Europe and here's proof. And they hold up that Miguel Almiron transfer. And remember that every agent gets a cut of that transfer fee. Both the player and the agent, their eyeballs are going to pop out of their heads because they're finally going to realize that they don't have to make that jump immediately to Europe. That may not be available to them. They can move to Atlanta. They can get that proper transfer fee. And then double their money essentially on the way out the door, and everyone wins. And if you're Atlanta United, you proved your model works. You're still hyper competitive. You're still bringing in big names. To me, proving the model works and getting that money, that's hyper important. And theoretically, if your players are good enough that you have in, you should win trophies anyway.
So let me confirm a question here, Nick. If Atlanta United is bounced in the round of 16 by Herediano, but they get $32 million from Miguel Almiron in the summer, was it worth it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Nope. That's cool. That's cool. John, for you, if you keep Miguel Almiron into the summer window and you loan Barco out, what makes it worth it?
See, I mean, I'm looking at this from the player perspective. What does Miguel Almiron want? And if you are in the neighborhood of 30, which is where I think it's going to end up anyway, I still think that it's going to be somewhere in the middle for Newcastle, or West Ham's going to come in and swoop in toward the end of it all. What precedent does it set if you have an unhappy player and you wait another window to get him out of here for 32? So I'm thinking, I know that Darren has a number, and I think that we know it's pretty much close to 30. And I'm thinking that if you get 30, then send Miguel on his way, give him the testimonial at some point and be good to go with it.
Jarrett, if you keep Miguel Almiron in the CONCACAF Champions League campaign and you don't get the number, you don't get the transfer you want, you go ahead and keep him, do you have to win CONCACAF Champions League for it to end up being worth it? Or, as Nick says, is it more about that transfer fee you get at the end of it?
I don't think you have to win to make it worth it. I think you want to win in any case, no matter what. Sure. I think keeping him here gives you a better chance. And I don't know that we can judge it right now. I mean, in kind of Nick's vein with this, I don't know that we can judge anything about it until he's gone. Until we can look back on it and say, well, it was the right move or the wrong move to keep, for him to have stayed for an extra 6 months, or, I don't know that he'd stay for an extra year, but that it was the right move or the wrong move. We're not going to know until it's gone, and we can, really dig into revisionist history, as cheap and easy as that may be sometimes. I think it's just really hard to say on December 31st of September or December, January, whatever month it is, the 31st of January, it's going to be hard to say in that moment without, seeing the rest of it play out.
Okay, Joe, let me ask you which one's more important, because this is an interesting thing. Since I've been talking big picture with you for the MLS, for the league, and where things stand, and what is that model for the league going forward. What's a bigger deal for Major League Soccer, in your opinion? Bringing in $30+ million for Miguel Almiron, or an MLS club winning CONCACAF Champions League for the first time? Which one's more important for the long-term future of the league?
I think it's the money. I think because that puts you as a global player, and I think that the more, once you kind of establish yourself as this financial mechanism, and you will continue to get these players, and I think that winning the CONCACAF Champions League would just be more a matter of time than anything else. That said, I don't think that, for me, getting the $30 million for Miguel Almiron is not really that important, in my opinion. I don't think, and I'll be the first to say, my interests are very different to Darren Eales' interests, who's working for the team owner. But, it's not money out of my pocket, essentially, or money going back into my pocket. And, Miguel is going to be far and away the biggest transfer sale in MLS history whenever it happens. There's going to be so many things. You could sell him for $18 million, and you could tout how great of a deal it is for days and days. I want to prove that the model works, like Nick was talking about. I want to make sure, and it not just as a financial mechanism to make the club money and keep the club on a sustainable route, which is important, but it's important for to be able to show that you are an outlet to help get players from South America to Europe, or to get you're a great place for someone who's gone to Europe and has struggled to kind of rebuild their careers. I think that that's super important, and through doing that, you will get quality. You will bring in quality players, and then winning is just kind of a matter of time. I think it'll just happen once you start, because you're just going to start bringing in more and more and more quality players to the point where you're just going to establish yourself in competitions.
You guys have sold me on it, and I think Gwen was barking her approval as well. The game changer in this scenario for the league is the sale being as big as it can be. And if that has to wait, maybe it has to wait. Because, again, Atlanta United doesn't have to make the sale right now. There are other solutions, and they don't have to have $25 million right now as opposed to 30-plus in the summer. They're not in a must-sell situation. And for the growth of the league, maximizing that deal is going to be the true game changer. I think winning CONCACAF Champions League would be a game changer, period. I do think it's a big thing for this league going forward, but maybe the money is the more important one in proving that model.
If I could interject real quick.
Yeah,
if I could interject real quick. I think another huge game changer, and this is a lot of pressure, but I think a huge game changer is going to be Miguel Almiron's performances once he goes over there, because that is going to be the litmus test for what MLS players can provide a quality European team. Agreed. And I hate to put all that pressure on him, but he is really the only one who's made that leap so far, or is going to make that leap. And teams are going to look at him as the litmus test. So I think that's going to be hugely important, not just for Atlanta United, but all of MLS, because every club has assets. Some are maybe more saleable to Europe than others, but at the end of the day, you got guys like Alberth Elise. If Miguel Almiron had already performed at a high level in Europe, Alberth Elise would be going for more than $8 million, or Houston Dynamo wouldn't be needing to hold out for $8 million. They'd be holding out for $18 million. So his performance is going to be huge, and every MLS fan should be paying close attention to him and hoping that he does performs as well as he possibly can there.
And here's one thing I wanted to chime in with, and this is why the model is, again, not just important to Atlanta United, but also MLS overall, is that we have in this league a creeping number of NFL owners who are now buying in. And one of those owners, Mr. Bob Kraft, who has continuously used his team as like a rounding error on his spreadsheet. Can you imagine if he looks down at Atlanta United and sees that not only did they ask $30 million for Miguel Almiron, they got it. And when you see that profit sheet hit, you don't think that's going to wake up the Bob Crafts of the world or the Cronkies of the world who just kind of have a team but don't really do anything with it? This is an opportunity for a league to say, wow, we can actually make money, serious money in this if we do it the right way. And so let's invest in our club infrastructure and our scouting department, in the way that we market our team and to make it more viable, or make it more entertaining and open to a European audience. How do we do that? How do we make ourselves more attractive overall if we can accomplish that same kind of profitability that Atlanta United is doing? And that means taking a short-term loss on a transfer fee. If you can maximize and double your money, more than double your money on the way out the door. So it's something where this could be an eye-opener for a lot of people and frankly, a shot in the arm in a way that maybe a CONCACAF Champions League wouldn't. They would just look at Atlanta winning CONCACAF Champions League as, oh, well, there goes another billionaire spending his money winning a tournament. Anyone can do that if you have the cash. Instead, now we're saying, oh, we are ready for a higher form of competition, not just on the field, but now financially as well.
That's a great point, because I think the league sells itself on the idea that anybody can win MLS Cup at any given time. And to a degree, that's true. I think it's becoming less true as the league continues to mature. But yeah, it's the playoffs. You can get hot in the playoffs and go on a run, especially the format now, and pull upsets and win, even though you're not the best roster. I think CONCACAF Champions League shows a little bit more of there's only a certain number of teams who can truly win it from MLS. But I agree, Nick. I think what can happen here is, okay, you go win CONCACAF Champions League. There are going to be teams in this league that say, we can't do that. Houston will say, we can't build a team deep enough to do that. It would take every bit of luck possible to win CONCACAF Champions League for us. Atlanta can do it because Atlanta's got the money to build the roster they have. But if you're able to go get this type of money for a Miguel Almiron, this is the game changer for every team in this league. And I'll divide it into three different groups. Your teams like Atlanta, who are not afraid to spend, but also not afraid to spend on young players who they think will mature in value. And this is brand new for this league. This is something we've never seen done at this level, and the Miguel Almiron model would prove that, okay, this can actually be effective for the league. I think you would see a Bob Kraft say, well, I can go sign a guy from Argentina. Now, it's going to take the right scouting department. It's going to take the right manager to bring that out of them, and those are the other scenarios to this. But I could go sign a guy from Argentina for $3 million, for $5 million. And then if the market is there, turn around and sell them for 10 or 15. I think that could happen. I think your Houstons would benefit. Your teams that are going out and spending aren't developing their own players from their academy and are going out and spending, but they're spending $2 million or $1 million or $3 million in Central America. You would have to think that if Miguel Almiron's value is set at where it is, and now we know, okay, this is the going rate, that an Albert Ellis or a Romel Kyoto or a Mauro Manotas would be worth more money on the world market because MLS has now been proven. And I agree with Joe. It would take Miguel Almiron succeeding for that to be the long-term play. But I think at first you would see MLS clubs be able to say, well, Miguel went for this much money, and Albert Ellis has scored a similar number of goals and has a few less assists, but he can play this position for you, yada, yada, yada. But I think this would also benefit your FC Dallases, your New York Red Bulls, who are developing talent on their own, not going out and buying it, but developing it, because this type of deal would increase the worldwide market for Major League Soccer players, no matter how they came into the league. This, John, does kind of feel like that game changer for Major League Soccer that on the worldwide scale, and people have talked about it, from Eric Winalda to others have talked about Major League Soccer needs to be in the world market. That's how it's going to grow. This would be the explosion into the world market that we maybe never saw coming.
Yeah, and to Joe's point, I mean, for me, I know that a lot of, yes, the transaction is going to happen one way or another, but then there's always going to be the perception of his ability being linked to other transactions of that level. And to your point, I think it also opens up the door to the academy teams and those who've invested well in their academies and they're making sure that they're developing the young players. I mean, we're seeing it with Tyler Adams. And, you know, you're seeing it with players from FC Dallas as well. So I think that the precedent is being set in the extremes with the Miguel Almiron proposed transaction plus the academy players who were developed through systems and are now working their way overseas. And to your point, you have that third example of having franchises that you hope are going to find a way that works for them, that they're not going to try to keep up with the Joneses, but they're going to try to make their own path like a Houston could in finding players as they have and then doing their business that way and still being successful. So I think that you have, to your point, I think that there are three separate pocketbooks that can be employed here that could end up with differing levels of success for MLS. But the bottom line is that it could be successful for franchises across the board, regardless of approach.
So let's bounce around a few news items before we wrap up. And there's a little something for everybody in this. Nick, let's start with you. You were very interested in the streaming deal that DC United has signed with Flow Sports. Here's a little more on it that came out this afternoon. Pablo Maurer, who writes for The Athletic, said that industry sources are saying, and this is from the Sports Business Daily, industry sources are saying that the Flow Sports deal was worth more than $13 million to DC United over the 4-year commitment. That's game-changing type of money that no other club in this league is seeing for a TV deal.
Yeah, and in my mind, that it goes again to say that this is a positive thing. I know everybody gets angry when we talk about putting content behind a paywall, and justifiably so. Just look at Champions League and how Turner worked that out. I mean, it can be frustrating, but when you have a team like DC United who has either been unwilling or unable to invest in their front office infrastructure when it comes to marketing, public relations, and things like that, and you have a group who's going to come in, invest a ton of cash with you, and then put your players on display, somebody out there did the math and said, okay, we get X number of ratings from our normal television broadcast. This is how much money we're getting from the Flow Sports deal. If we offer incentives, how much money can we make and how much viewership can we get? Okay, great. Can we expand our national footprint? Yes. Okay, great. Let's do the deal. To me, this is a win for DC United. It's a win for MLS. I'm sure I'm going to get butchered on the timeline for being pro paywall in this aspect, but this isn't the UN. This is these clubs are ran like a business. MLS is a business. They have to make money. And it's not ideal that a paywall would be put in place, but if you get, behind the scenes special access, and I keep bringing the Sunderland Till I Die piece in, if you get something like that for DC, whether it's winning or losing, I think that's something that would become must-see TV in my mind. And it'd be the first time that we would see something like that for MLS with MLS branding and MLS players, and I'm here for it.
Jarrett, people got a little riled up this afternoon as the Super Draft came to, I don't know, it's an interesting conclusion because there were a whole lot of players named Pass that were picked. Dylan Castanheira, the goalkeeper from Columbia University who signed a deal with Atlanta United too, was drafted in the 4th round by FC Dallas. What did you think about that?
I didn't know they could do that. That's amazing. I didn't know you could
why not
draft a dude like that. And I figured if once he had signed with somebody, I thought we were pretty much done and dusted with the whole drafting part of it. I didn't know you could draft him again once he had been once he had signed. But
it's a USL deal.
Yeah, and in my mind it's like, well, it is MLS. You kind of have to. You kind of have to pick up the antique and look at it from all angles before you consider really what it is. And this one just happened to open up and a Mogwai popped out. That was fun. That was kind of fun. It was kind of funny to watch all of it unfold. But I think some of it also got kind of fired up by I think it was Ben Bear's tweet about calling it like a shot, and I think that also kind of.
Oh man, okay. And this was something I had an issue with today as we were sitting around watching all this unfold. Calling it a shot, okay, whatever, that's fine. But acting like, well, Atlanta United would not have a emergency goalkeeper to call up. Do we remember a guy named Paul Christensen? And do we remember that they have 3 goalkeepers on the roster right now? Just saying. I don't know.
Yeah, calling it a shot was funny. I hugely enjoyed the bickering between Ben Bear and Doug Roberson today.
The bickering was funny. It felt very out of place because this. I mean, he will play minutes this year with USL if he stays here. I mean, he could go to camp with Dallas now. I mean,
sounds very Rule 5-ish to me.
No, it's not. I mean, there's not a comparison.
He's no Dan Uglo. Let's be fair.
Oh, jeez. The only thing I can come up with
Rule 5 pick, sir.
It's 2 different universes. I mean, MLS and USL are two different universes in terms of contracts. That's why you can sign a player to a USL deal, but if they're going to come up as a homegrown, they have to sign a new homegrown deal. Now, in this case, if Dylan comes to Atlanta United too and performs very well, for 2 years, Atlanta doesn't have his MLS rights. But right now, he would be, right today, he would be number 5 on the goalkeeper depth chart in MLS. Behind Brad Gazan, Alec Can, Brendan Moore, Paul Christensen, and then there's Dylan Castanera. And, there's Justin Garces, who's playing at UCLA and could be signed to a homegrown deal when you want to, and he's probably going to be on the U20 World Cup squad. I think it'll be okay. I think it will be okay. It feels like a silly 4th-round pick for FC Dallas, but, Joe, there were a lot of teams that just passed on 4th-round picks and 3rd-round picks. So why are we doing day 2 of the MLS Super Draft?
Why are we doing the 4th round of the draft? It makes no sense. To me, it reminds me of like Chad Henne getting, signing a deal with the Yankees, but then getting drafted by like the Cowboys in the 5th round or whatever, just in case he changes his mind or something. It reminds me of one of those situations.
I mean, I can tell you this. When I was conducting the A-League draft, which you think the MLS Super Draft going 4 rounds is ridiculous. A USL draft is even more ridiculous because you have the reverse of this situation.
You need to write a book, dude.
It'll happen. The 1998 A-League draft in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I think the Ruckus had probably one of the top picks because they were pretty bad in 1997. And I'll tell you who I would have picked because it was me doing the picks. I'll tell you who I would have picked if he hadn't been drafted in MLS, Pablo Mastroeni. Because that was the guy that I saw at the Combine when we were there. And I'm like, man, I really like him. And he went later in the MLS draft, but he was drafted. Why am I going to burn a pick on him? Because it's pointless. So we picked 2 players from Georgia Southern. I think one who did play for the team. Because why are we going to pick a guy who's been picked by MLS? This is the reverse. Maybe Dallas feels like, well, we could bring him in. And I saw their communications director, Carter Baum, say, well, maybe he decides to come to camp and decide to, instead of playing in USL with Atlanta United 2, playing with North Texas SC. I think the biggest difference is one's in the USL Championship and one's in USL League One. And he would still have goalkeepers in front of him at FC Dallas. Maybe not 4 plus a potential homegrown, but it's not really a clear path there. Speaking of USL, John, reports today from an interview with Jake Edwards, USL Championship expansion teams are now paying $7 million to come into the league. Teams were available for 6 figures not that long ago. The growth of USL and its importance in the American soccer landscape, I think it's continuing to grow.
Yeah, and I remember buzzing through an article, and the author was looking at the expansion sides and who could do really well, and the one that he focused on was the team in New Mexico, possibly making some serious inroads in year 1. And when you're investing that kind of money, when it's 7 figures to the left of the decimal point, and you're bringing in quality talent, you're not messing around because you're going to want instant results. And I'm looking forward to seeing it grow. I'm hoping for some kind of prudence. I just don't want it to be just scattershot where it's a T-shirt cannon and, you get a franchise and you get a franchise and then you end up with some poor decision making. But I'm looking forward to seeing the new guys. I'm looking forward to seeing the product that they all put out on the pitch this year. But with all of the hype that comes with it now and with all the dollars that you're spending, there's expectation. And I'm looking at all of these new guys. It's like, all right, so how many of you are going to be like New Mexico and how many of you are going to be like Loudoun United? That's just me putting it out there.
Loudoun United still does not have a manager hired or any player signed as of yet.
Yes.
That's a thing in the USL Championship in 2019. One more report before we wrap up. FC Cincinnati is reportedly going to sign, the nickname's amazing, the Tico Conte, Alan Cruz. You know what club Alan Cruz has played for? Herediano. That's a good thing for Atlanta United if one of their top players is signed by another MLS squad ahead of the CONCACAF Champions League. Good on you, FC Cincinnati. Keep it up. Let's wrap up with a question for each of you. Nick, what was your craziest thing that happened in the world of soccer over there from the weekend?
Zlatan Ibrahimovic completely trashing Ronaldo's move to Juventus, saying
okay, you have to explain.
Okay, so I only read a little bit of it, but Zlatan essentially was somehow came up with it. He started commenting on Cristiano Ronaldo's move to Juventus and how he was looking for a new challenge. And Zlatan essentially said, that's BS, that moving to Juve is not a challenge. Like, move to a championship side and get them up a level, that's a challenge. Well, that's crazy to me because when Juve was relegated to Serie B in the Calciopoli scandal, he used his agent, Mino Raiola, to force, through legal action, a release to get him to be able to go to Inter. And so he didn't want the challenge of getting a team from the championship, a.k.a. Serie B, back up to Serie A. So for anyone, especially him, to poop all over Ronaldo's move and claiming that he knows what a challenge is versus what a challenge isn't, is absolutely comical to me. And it just proves that Zlatan sometimes just needs to shut up and let his goal scoring speak for him.
Okay, we need a hot drop potentially on the Juventus dropping to Serie B saga, because it's one that I think some people know a little bit about, but maybe not the details. I would love to hear that hot drop. Can I make a request for one?
Yes, absolutely. We will do a full. I've hinted at it at a few at the earlier hot drops and gave a little bit of context to it, but I'm more than happy to do a deep dive on Calciopoli and how it helped propel Italy to the 2006 World Cup final.
I am all in on that. Okay, I will be looking forward to that. I'm going to ask each of you to give me your number one question for Atlanta United as they hit the training field for the first time in 2019 tomorrow. Jarrett, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. My number one question for Atlanta United going into training. Oh, man. This requires thought.
I like how you repeated the question to try to stall, to try to think about it, and then failed.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Classic
Are you
move
pass?
there.
I have a future in politics. Thank you very much. I expect none of you to ever talk to me again once that happens.
Awesome.
Just do it. Just do it. Frank de Boer doesn't go.
Like I said,
I don't have nearly enough of a baritone to pull that off.
If you have the right tone, you can pull that off. Yes.
Man, I guess for me, it's, who of the young players steps up? We know what happened with Andrew Carlton. Well, loosely, we know what happened. We know he wasn't there at the end of everything with the parade and with all that jazz. What does he show? Is he able to get back on the field and kind of earn some time back the way we saw Barco earn some time back at the end of the 2018 season? Do some of these other young players show enough in practice where, we watch them in practice and go, oh, that guy is starting to light things up? Of course, I mean, there's always going to be the George Bello questions, but a lot of for me is, what are these young guys, which ones show me that they are going to be, a legitimate contender to take minutes away from somebody in 2019?
Okay. Joe, what about you? What's your biggest question going into preseason?
Well, the question I want answered is Pity Martinez under contract? And if so, which I think he is, why isn't he at training?
I didn't see him. I was looking, but I didn't see him.
I was looking too. This is just speculation, but I'm sure he's legally under contract and he just has not been announced. Usually, there was a question about Pity Martinez today, and usually in these cases, when it is a rumor and the player is under contract to somebody else, they say that. They will say, we don't talk about players under contract with other clubs. That was not said today. And I think there's a reason why. So anyway, yeah, that's what I want to know. And hey, maybe there's a perfectly reasonable it's not really an excuse, but a reasonable explanation that he needs time off still. He just finished playing the Club World Cup. That's fine. But yeah, I would love to know that. Yeah, I guess that's the only thing.
Oh, I'm sure there'll be more because, this is very early in preseason. They have not officially hit the field yet. We saw some juggling later in the day. I saw Andrew and Goslin juggling a little bit on the field, a little bit of work outside, not much.
Those guys should be ecstatic from what they heard today.
Yeah, I think so too. I think there's a huge opportunity. Nick, what's your big question for Atlanta United as they go into preseason?
As I said on a previous Hot Drop, Frank de Boer identifies 3 groups when he walks into a locker room: the players who are true believers and will absolutely buy into the system, players who absolutely refuse to buy into the system, and then those who are not sure. And I want to know, who are the players in that second group who would absolutely not be on board for Frank de Boer's system?
Interesting. John, what about you?
For me, how long does it take for the message to translate over? And how long does it take for the guys who are in camp to get used to what Frank de Boer is saying? It's like, okay, you're used to hearing certain things a certain way. Now that de Boer is the man with the whistle, what's the translation time in getting what he wants done out there on the pitch? Because Champions League's going to be here before we know it. So everything's accelerated. I want to know what it's going to be like hearing the message from de Boer and how long it's going to take to get implemented.
I guess for me going into preseason, I think anytime you see a change at manager, different people look at players different ways. I might rate a player that you guys would not rate and vice versa. Who is it that maybe wasn't rated as highly by Tata Martino and didn't get as much playing time or wasn't trusted to see those minutes, who is rated differently by Frank de Boer? That's the one I'm waiting to see, because it happens. It happens with any team. It happens with any club in any league. And I think it will happen here. There's going to be somebody that's a surprise based off the last 2 years in terms of the minutes they get early. And not just because of rotation, just because, wow, okay, I didn't think that player was at this point, but they are under this new manager. I think it'll happen. I just don't know who it's going to be yet, and we'll have to wait and see. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out. I don't know how we managed to make some semblance of sense out of juggling between all of us, but it worked. It was pretty cool. I'm okay with it. I'll take it. I don't know if we can do it on a regular basis. I'm delirious, so I don't know if it worked or not. I think it did, but I have no idea, to be perfectly honest.
Just nod your head, go, yes,
I have so many questions about how tomorrow morning is going to go.
I don't know. I'm going to sleep. I know that much. Probably pretty soon.
Riffing off of Nick said, do you think de Boer is going to walk into the locker room and say, I have 3 names in these envelopes of people that will disappoint me?
There's no envelopes. There's no envelopes. There's none of that. There's no reality show. God, that was the worst gimmick.
No roses.
No, none of that.
Nick would be a terrifying manager to play for.
George Bello, will you accept this rose?
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's time to go. It's been one of those days. Thanks, y'all, for listening. Thanks, y'all, for contributing. We will have hot drops this week, potentially, from the Garlic Bread Warlord, and I'm waiting on the Juve drama one, yes.
Complete with the music.
Yes, that too. That would be great. However you want to explain that whole saga in Italian soccer history, I'm all in on it. Joe Patrick, what's coming up at Dirty South Soccer?
We've got all kinds of stuff from the Frank de Boer coverage. We've got availability all week, which I didn't even know about until late this evening when I got an email. So we'll be there
in the middle of the show.
We get to talk to Breck Shea tomorrow. I wouldn't miss that for the world.
Oh.
if that's not reason to tune into Dirty South Soccer, I don't know what is.
There you go. Dirty South Soccer will have coverage from Breck Shea, as will 92.9 The Game tomorrow from Jarrett Smith. He will be. Are you going to be doing like the whole deal where you're on our show, then you do 92.9 stuff, then you're back, or how's that going to go?
I think availability is after 11 o'clock. So.
Oh yeah, they moved it back.
It's
That's
late.
True.
It's like 11:30. Yeah,
I'm really upset about this. I love that early morning availability. I liked getting up and
I like the morning too.
Yeah.
Well, you guys are going to have to go have lunch at Bojangles after you do your media availability. So you're set
look,
there.
Until they bring back the actual pork chop biscuit, me and Bojangles are going to have words. I'll still go spend my money there.
Well, but you'll be there for lunch, so you don't have to worry about that.
I'm still getting a biscuit.
Man, okay. My bad. Sorry.
Or I'll go to Martin's.
Oh, there we go.
Like a good local.
Hey, I don't have a Martin's near me. I have had somebody say, look, I have had somebody tell me that next chance that they're going to be at something I'm going to be at, they're going to bring me a Martin's chicken biscuit, okay?
Oh.
I've been promised this.
Too. Next time we do something, I'm going to go to a Martin's, take a picture of the menu, order you to order something, and then I'll bring it to you.
That's strong.
Jason, they're majestic. They're majestic.
It's been probably the last time I had a Martin's breakfast anything, it's been 20 years, at least.
I have never.
The Martin's in Morrow. See, at least I've done it. John doesn't even know where Martin's is.
Nope.
Man.
Guilty as charged.
They don't serve Brunswick stew either.
That's true. And on that note, we're going to leave now before this goes even more off the rails. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We appreciate it. Mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha plata, all the lira.
Mucha lira, y'all.
Joe, you can say
Mucha
whatever
plata.
you want.
Yeah, come on, Joe.
One of us.